The forgotten great skills and craft of the people of Am that became known as science and technology by the Gentile people of what is now known as Europe. Many people who might happen to read a copy of this book I have written may ask the question, where is all the skills and craft I have mentioned that the people of Am used to have during the ancient time? And how come they do not have all these skills and craft of today? First, to many of these people who might ask this question, I would like to answer by saying that it is because of the many prophecies of the scriptures that were spoken against many of the various kingdoms of the people of Am that has been fulfilled already, and it has taken its toll on our kingdoms and our civilization as a people of today. It is also because of the slavery experience and colonial conquest of our lands and its people that has further caused a brain drain of our knowledge, skills, and craft to go to benefit many of our conquerors that became known as science and technology of today by the people of Europe and the Mohammedans. This knowledge of the people of Am was passed on to many of the Asiatic countries of the people of Shem, many of whom at one time was under colonial rulership and slavery of the people of Europe. And by so doing, they have passed on many of their knowledge that they have gotten from us that became known as science and technology to them as well. If one should consider the period of the conquest and enslavement of the people of Am by the Persian, the Greeks, the Roman, the Turks, and the Mohammedans, and the rest of the Gentile family of Europe, who came from out of the breakup of the Roman Empire, that has further caused many of our craft and skill to go to enrich their civilization rather than to enrich our own civilization. Just think for one moment that if the land of Am and its people did not have so many conquerors and enslavers, they would have long time been making motor cars and aeroplanes long before these things came about by way of the Gentile people of Europe who had started the making of these things of today that did pass on to many other countries of what became known as Asia. Just to give the reader of this book some inside knowledge of the rich and great civilization that the people of Am are coming from, that many of them and many other people of today have no knowledge of. There in Ezekiel chapter 28, starting from verse 2, Yahweh went on to say to the prophet Ezekiel, Say unto the prince of the city of Tyrus, which is speaking of the kingdom of Tyre, which was a Phoenician Canaanite kingdom that was in the area of Lebanon and what is now known as Syria of the so-called Middle East. There Yahweh went on to say to Ezekiel that he must say to the ruler of the city of Tyre, that because your heart is lifted up, and you have said that I am a God, I sit in the seat of gods, in the midst of the sea, which was speaking of the Mediterranean Sea. Yet you are a man, and not a God, though you set your heart as the heart of God. Verse 3 went on to say that, Behold, you are wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that they can hide from you. With your wisdom and with your understanding, you have gotten gold and silver into your treasures. By your great wisdom and by your trafficking, you has increased your riches, and your heart is lifted up because of your riches. Verse 7 went on to say, Behold, therefore, I will bring strangers upon you, the terror of the nation, and they shall draw their sword against the beauty of your wisdom, and they shall defile your brightness. Verse 8 went on to say, They shall bring you down to the pit and the grave, and you shall die the death of them that are slain in the midst of the sea. One can read the complete chapter for themselves to get a good understanding of what is written there. Also, Deuteronomy chapter 9, starting from verse 1, There Moses said to the ancient children of Israel, when Yahweh took them from out of the land of Mizraim by the hand of Moses, that they must hear, O Israel, you are to pass over the river Jordan this day, to go into the land of Canaan, to possess nation greater and mightier than yourself, whose city great and fenced up to heaven, a people great and tall as the children of the Anakim, whom they the children of Israel know of, and whom you have heard the saying, who can stand before the children of Anak, who was the father of the tribe of the Anakim people of the land of Canaan, because these people were a giant people of Canaan. Moses went on to say to the children of Israel, understand therefore this day, that it is Yahweh your God who go over before you as a consuming fire, and he shall destroy them, and he shall bring them down before your face. So shalt you drive them out and destroy them quickly, as Yahweh had said. Moses went on to say to the children of Israel, speak not in your heart that Yahweh had driven out these nations before your face, because of your own righteousness, to possess the land of Canaan. But it was for the wickedness of these nations why Yahweh driven out them before your face. Joshua chapter 17 and verse 16 mentioned that the Canaanite people who were living in the valley of the land of Canaan had chariot that was made from out of iron. And this craft and their skills of their making of things from out of iron was way before the Greeks and the Romans, who they say it was the Greeks and the Romans who had started the civilization of the world. With the rest of the other Gentile people of Europe that came from out of the breakup of the Roman Empire and started the making of things out of iron as a part of their technology of skills of today, that they name as science and technology, that did start with the people of Ham. My reason for bringing out these prophecies is to show of the various prophecies that were spoken against the various kingdoms of the people of Ham, that have brought our destruction and have caused us to be a washout race of people of today, because of our many conquerors and enslavers that the people of Ham has been through. Although the people of Ham were the inventors of slavery of the children of Israel and others, today slavery have brought destruction to our civilization and have caused confusion to many of the people of Ham of today. And it have caused us as a people not to know who we are or where we're coming from because of colonialism and slavery. My reason for making this statement, it is because it was the people of Ham who had started reading, writing, arithmetic, medicine, physician that became known today as doctors, the making of chariots and wagons that had run on wheels, from where motor cars came from that had brought much wealth and riches to the Gentile family of Europe, and many of the Asiatic countries of the people of Shem that they have copied from the people of Europe. And this craft of making motor cars came from the combustion engine that was started by the Gentile people of Europe, that originally came from chariot and horse and buggies. This time was way before the Gentile people of Europe started the making of motor cars and other things out of iron, that they have gotten many of these skills from the people of Ham of the Asian world, that is now known as science and technology. My reason for saying these things, it is because during the early civilization of the people of Ham, they were far more advanced in knowledge, craft, and skills in making things out of iron than that of our European conquerors and enslavers, who came up later and got many of these knowledge and skill from us, the people of Ham. People like the Greeks, who got many of their knowledge and writing abilities and skills from the Phoenician people of Canaan, the people of Mizraim, the Hittites, the Assyrian, and the Babylonian Cushite people of Nimrod. In the case of the Romans, they have gotten many of their knowledge and skills from the Greek the Phoenician people of Carthage, and the Etruscans who were living in the land area that became known as Italy. Also, from the Hittite people who were living in what was known as the Anatolia area of Turkey, from where Aeneas left from the city of Troy and went and established what became known as the settlement of Latendom. This settlement of Latendom gave birth to the Latin people that became known as the Romans, from where Romulus came from, that gave birth to the name of Rome, that did take its name from himself. Many of the Roman knowledge that they had gotten was later spread to the rest of the Gentile land of Europe, who were under slavery and colonialism of the Romans, of the land that became known as Europe. Just think of the gift, skills, and craft that many of the people of Am had at one time. My reason for making this statement, it is because many of the people of Am at one time had the capability of communicating through the beat of the drum that was known as the drum speak. The beat of the drum would tell other villagers who were coming to their village if a person was sick or dying or dead. The beat of the drum would pass on the message to others. The Gentile people of what became known as Europeans did not possess any of this kind of skills and knowledge like that of the people of Am, of what became known as Ghana of today, apart from the native people who became known as the Red Indians of what is now known as the United States of America, who had sent war signals through the beat of the drum and smoke signal. There was no other race of people on the face of planet Earth who had such knowledge and skill like that of the people of Am and the native who the Gentile people of Europe named as Red Indians. Sad to say that because of the fulfillment of the various prophecies of the scripture that Yahweh had spoken against many of the kingdom of the people of Am of the Asian world, it has caused slavery and colonialism of this talent of the people of Am to be lost or was taken over by other people to benefit their societies. The Gentile family of Europe has taught the world of people who came under their captivity that they have civilized us Amite people and other people that they had conquered and who became a part of their colonies and citizens of today. What they forget to say and teach us is that there is a modern civilization and there are an Asian civilization, and the modern civilization of the Gentile people of today came from out of the Asian civilization of the people of Am of that time. The reason why the modern civilization of the Gentile people of Europe came into existence today is because of the fulfillment of the prophecy of Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4. This prophecy of Daniel went on to explain that many shall run to and fro, meaning that people will be going to this place or that country, seeking a better way out of their circumstances of life, and that knowledge was going to increase. Many people today don't even know and understand that many of the modern technological advancement that many of the Gentile people of Europe has brought about in today's time, that they call as science and technology, is only within the last 250 years or 300 years ago. And it is only because of the fulfillment of this prophecy of Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4, where the prophecy mentioned that knowledge was going to increase, that has brought about these modern technological advancement of the Gentile people that they name as science and technology. This knowledge of the people of Europe was also passed on to many of the Asiatic countries due to the fact that the Gentile people of Europe were looking for cheap laborers to do their work. And as I've stated, that many of the people of Shem, that is now known as Asia, were at one time under slavery and colonialism of the Gentile people of Europe. Why do I make this statement? If one should check and see if they can find this available information, They will see and understand that many of the modern technological advancements that the family of Europe has made and called as science and technology is only within the period I have mentioned above. Before this period that was mentioned, there was no television, radio, computer, aeroplane, motor cars, cell phone, or rocket going to the moon. The modern day medicine that many of the people of Europe have brought about in today's time were not available before the period I've mentioned. Even though I've come to the knowledge and the understanding that the gas mask and the traffic light signal was invented by a white man of the United States by the name of Garrett Morgan. Unfortunately, when I check out the dictionary and the A to Z index of the Encyclopedia Britannica, I could not see any information about this person, and I could not get any available information about him whatsoever. Many of the modern day war machines that the European people have brought about were not available before the period I've mentioned above. This prophecy of Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4 is not only speaking about the modern day technological advancement of the Gentile people of what is now known as European people, that they call as science and technology, but it is also speaking about the knowledge of Yahweh, His Son, Yeshua, and His holy word, the scripture, and His kingdom that is to come. However, many of the people of today still do not have a full knowledge and understanding of Yahweh and His holy word, the scripture, for themselves. This is because many of the people of today are deceived by the various doctrine that came down from the Roman Catholic Church and that of Protestantism, who were former Roman Catholic believers, and that of the Mohammedan people of their religious doctrines. The encyclopedia clearly explained that the various churches of today came from the Protestantism, who were known as the Reformation Church movement, that had broke off originally from the Church of Rome, that became known as the Catholic Church. Yeshua had foretold in the scripture at Matthew chapter 24 and verse 11 that many false prophets shall arise and shall deceive many people, and this is true. Yet there are many people today who have far more knowledge about Yahweh than in the Old Covenant and New Covenant time of the scripture, because in that time only the children of Israel had the knowledge and the understanding of Him, for they were the only set of people He was dealing with, who He gave His laws and commandments to, and to no other people. Although all the other nation of the people of that time had their own gods and goddesses that they used to worship and serve, many people of that time, and even today's time, do not have any knowledge of Yahweh and His kingdom that is to come, to take over rulership of the earth from these political rulers that was set up by the Gentile people during their colonial conquest of the world. I would also like to mention that many of the modern technological advancement that the Gentile family has brought about in today's time came from out of the mindset of their own many captive and enslaved people that became their citizens and properties that they have gained various knowledge and skill from. Their ideas they have used to develop into their modern technology that many people see today, that they have learned from their many captive, although many of the time they may not acknowledge it to be so, and display themselves as if they had all these knowledge before the captive of their many people. One can see from what I have written that the modern day technological advancement of the Gentile people of Europe in today's time is tying with the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4. Daniel chapter 8 and verse 25 went on to say that through his policy, meaning the Gentile family of Europe, they shall cause craft to prosper in their hands. And he that mean they shall magnify themselves in their heart, and by peace they shall destroy many. This also is true, because it has been done just like that from the early colonial days of slavery to a present time by the Gentile people of Europe. If one has the eyes and the historical knowledge to know and to see and to understand these events that has been done by the European people of their conquest of other people of the world, using psychology, diplomacy, and strategy to keep many of their captive people down, and to destroy many of their captive and slave people who became their citizens in many ways and forms. And this is a reality of life living under the Gentile European colonial system of today. The he and the they that the scripture is speaking about is the Gentile people of Europe, with their modern technological advancement and their modern day army of war machine, who shall also stand up against the Prince of Prince, but they shall be broken without hands, as it is so pointed out in the scripture. The Prince of Prince that the scripture has mentioned is no other than Yeshua, better known as Jesus Christ at his second coming, who is the Son of the Supreme King of the universe, from whom all things flow. There is only one set of people that is ruling the world today that is matched up with this prophecy of the scripture, and that is the Gentile family of Europe, who have control over the world affair along with the Asiatic people of today. They, the Gentile people, have done many of these things that is mentioned in the prophecy of Daniel chapter 8 to many of the captive people worldwide who came under their colonial captivity. They also have all the modern day technological war machine and the capability of making these things that is mentioned in the prophecy of Daniel chapter 8. The second set of people who are in control of world affairs of today are the Asiatic people. But many of the Asiatic countries were at one time former slave colonies of the Gentile people of Europe during their colonial era of conquering many nations who became their captive and slave. Many of the Asiatic countries of today are the more tolerated people that they, the Gentile people, have allowed to be in second position to them. And they have also passed on many of their technological skills and know-how to many of the people of Asia, that it did help them to develop into second place power behind the Gentile people of Europe. The people of Europe allowed many of their modern technological know-how to pass on to many of the Asiatic countries, simply because they were looking for cheap laborers to do their work. Also pertaining to the Gentile advancement of today, at Romans chapter 10 and verse 19, there Yahweh said that he was going to provoke Israel to jealousy by them who was no people, and by a foolish nation will I anger you, saith Yahweh. This prophecy is speaking about the children of Israel, who are the people of Yahweh, and the power that the Gentile people of Europe have today came about to provoke Israel to jealousy, because they did not keep the law and the commandment of Yahweh that he gave to them by the prophet Moses and other prophets of Israel that Yahweh had used to speak to them as they spoke men. According to Deuteronomy chapter 28, starting from verse 1 to verse 13, there the scripture mentioned that the people of Israel were supposed to be the head of all people, ruling over everything and everyone after the downfall of the various kingdoms of the people of Ham. This downfall of the various kingdom and civilization of the people of Ham was brought about by means of the children of Israel, the Mohammedan Muslim people, and the Gentile people of what became known as the land of Europe, that Yahweh did use to bring about the destruction of many of these kingdoms of the people of Am. Yahweh did promise the ancient children of Israel that they would be the head of all people if they had kept his commandment and stick to his laws and precepts. But they did not do so. Otherwise, they would have been in control of world affairs today, rather than the Gentile people of Europe, who are now in control of the world affairs today. Deuteronomy chapter 15 and verse 6 did mention that the people of Israel would lend to many nations, but they would not borrow from no other nation. They would reign over other nations, but no other nation would rule or reign over them if they had kept the commandment and the laws of Yahweh, but they did not do so. The Gentile people of Europe of those times were not a powerful race of people during the early civilization and kingdom of the people of Am, in that early period of the human history that is known as ancient civilization. My reason for making this kind of statement, it is, Yahweh had revealed to King Nebuchadnezzar of the kingdom of Babylon a dream he did not understand, of the various powers that was to rise up and have dominion over the earth after the fall of Mizraim, the Philistine, the Assyrian, the various Canaanite kingdom, and the Babylonians. This included Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom power of Babylon that was ruling at the time of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, until Daniel the prophet helped him to understand what his dream was all about. The dream of Nebuchadnezzar had is also tied with the vision that Daniel the prophet had, that is mentioned in Daniel chapter 7, starting from verse 1 to verse 9, which is speaking about the same thing of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but it was described in a different way from the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream of the various kingdoms that was to come up and have dominion over the earth, until the establishment of Yahweh's kingdom that will rule over the earth by Yeshua, who is our King and Master, who will destroy all the political government that was set up by the various European colonial rulers during the slavery colonial days of their conquest of people and their lands. Also, the Asiatic people of today are not the targeted people that they want to keep down, like many of us Amite people, who they have been preying upon for centuries, after many of the Asiatic countries were given their independence of self-rule from many of these European colonial powers. This is one of the reasons why many of the Asiatic people of today can go into any of the Gentile European neighborhood and open their own little business there without any problem from these Gentile European people who are living there. It was not possible during the early colonial days when the Gentile people of Europe was mapping up the countries of the world among themselves to be their empire of colonies. Because in those days, they, the Asiatic people, were the targeted people who they used to prey upon to be their captive. Whether it is the Indian people or the Chinese people, there is no problem for them in today's time in comparison to the many Amite people who are their targeted people after many of the Asiatic people were given their freedom of independence from many of the European rulers. In the early colonial days, before many Amite people were brought over to take the place of the native Asiatic people of their new world as the new slave to serve them, it was many of the Asiatic people who they had called as Indian were their targeted people that they used to hunt for and prey upon and spot upon and were considered less than human beings. Not many people know that it was the various Asiatic people of what became known as the New World of the Americas and the West Indies were the first slave for many of the Gentile people of Europe of their conquered world, as they did call it. Many of the Chinese and the real Indian people of Asia were brought over to the new world of the Gentile people of Europe as slave and cheap laborers to serve them and to do their work, even though they, the Gentile people, did not bother to teach any of these things in their various history class of their school system and colleges to many of their students who attend this institution. This is the reason why there is a large Indian and Chinese population of the West Indies and the Americas as the new world of the people of Europe, because they were brought over as cheap laborers and slaves for these people to serve them. Although they, the Gentile people, had tried their very best to hide this kind of history of knowledge from the world of people who came under their captivity about the enslavement of the various natives and in other Asiatic countries that they had power and rulership over, yet Yahweh has allowed this knowledge to shine through these pages of this book, the untold, forgotten great civilization of the people of Ham. Unfortunately, they only teach us and the world of people who came under their rulership that we, the Hamite people, who they call as Negroes and black people, were the slaves that they had brought over to serve them. They do not bother to mention anything about the various natives who they had enslaved to death and take away their lands, and see themselves as a new native of what is now known as the Americas and the West Indies. The same is true for what became known as Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and wheresoever the Gentile people went and conquered and set up their colonies, and see themselves as the new native of these conquered lands. So many of the natives who are around in today's time do not know anything about these histories, because they were not taught of these things, and they do not have any knowledge or idea of this history I have written about. It is also mentioned in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25 that these same Gentile people will seek to change things and time and laws, and they have done just that, starting from the Greeks to the Roman to the present day Gentile family that came from out of the breakup of the Roman Empire of Europe. They have even changed the world map of today and the land description from what is shown in the scripture map of 1890 of the land of Ham, his sons and grandchildren, who became a nation of people in what became known as Africa and the so-called Middle East, to brainwash many people of today who do not know the true history about this land era they now name as Africa and the Middle East. They have even changed the law of Yahweh that is mentioned in Leviticus chapter 18 and verse 22 to verse 25, that a man must not have any kind of sexual activity with another man. But they have made their own laws that a man can marry to another man, or a woman can marry to another woman of their choice. And by so doing, they have corrupted the mind of their many captives who came under their system of rulership with all sorts of immorality, evilness, and who would see themselves as Christian people, followers of Christ, as they did put it. In a book titled A Political History of Tropical Africa, there is a map showing the land era of what they had called as Tropical Africa during the Portuguese conquest of the people of Ham. This map that is shown in this book shows that what was known as Tropical Africa did begin from the borderline of what is now known as Turkey and a part of the Mediterranean era, all the way to what is now known as South Africa, that was first named as Cape of Good Hope by the Portuguese. Then the name South Africa came by the Dutch, who took over power of South Africa from the Portuguese. Then came the French and the British later to take part of the colonial conquest of what became known as South Africa. This map of tropical Africa is not in harmony in what is shown in the modern world map of today of the so-called Africa that is much smaller in size than what is shown in the book I have mentioned above. Just think of the riches the land of Ham have given to the new world of the Gentile people of Europe that they did not know of before, such as watermelon, bananas, plantain, mangoes, that is now grow all over the new world, that they make a lot of money from, that was brought over from the land of Ham and is now grown in many other places, that were brought by the Gentile people for investment and for making money. Thank you, YouTube, for watching this video of mine of knowledge and of history that many people of today have no knowledge of. But again, my heart desire and my motive is to bring knowledge and enlightenment first to the people of Ham and to many other people who may not know of these histories I have written about or even mentioned in various books and in the scripture itself. But again, give praise, give thanks to Yahweh for bringing this enlightenment out to benefit many other people also. Take care.